Hello, and welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted. I'm your host, ObjectivelyDan, and joining me today is a very, very special guest. This is Courtney Stewart, president of Metroplex Atheists, one of the hosts of Atheist Edge, and a whole bunch of other stuff on there. I've been really wanting you to come on for a little bit while now. Last time we tried to have you on, we had a little bit of technical difficulties, but you're here today in person, no less.
Indeed.
And I just think that's awesome.
I came back with a fury.
Yeah, that's right. So, Courtney, I just thought we could start this off by you just telling us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing and, you know, why you like being here. So,
thanks. It's really nice to be here. I'm excited to be in this community. I can already see that it's got a nice establishment of place because it's really
keep talking. Go ahead.
a good. Seems like a really good community with a place to meet, which is cool because we don't really have the same type of like infrastructure, but we're working on it.
Yes. So tell me about your group with like Atheist Edge and like Metroplex. So like, what are these things that I keep saying? Like, and what do you guys do?
Yeah. So Metroplex Atheist is a local community group in DFW.
That is the Dallas-Fort Worth area for those who aren't from Texas. Yeah.
Dallas-Fort Worth. So we're called obviously Metroplex Atheists, and it's one of the oldest in Texas. I think it's the oldest in Texas. But we're considered one of the more activist groups, and so we've done protests of Pastor Jeffress. We've organized banner campaigns and bus campaigns, billboards, things like that. So I became president of them about a year ago, and it's been quite the adventure. And it's really fun to. The main goal of it is creating that sense of community for people who have lost their religion, and then also community outreach and education. For me, it's about breaking down the stigma about that label of atheism and the negative associations people have with it. And then it's also about separation of church and state issues. So we deal with those as well.
Yeah, so you guys do a lot of stuff. I've seen you guys in the news. I'm friends with some of the other members that are up there. And from what I've seen, I mean, you guys are just doing great work, like you said, just making sure the separation of church and state is there and giving people who are just curious about their own religious beliefs and stuff, and maybe having those kinds of conversations and stuff. I've seen you guys talk to other people through that, and I just think it's wonderful what you guys are doing. I'm really glad you get to be here.
Yeah, so most recently we were interviewed by a CNN special, I believe a week ago, that it's on Hulu. It's called United Shades of America, with I believe I'm saying his name right, Kamau Bell. He's a really interesting comedian, and basically journalism is what he's dabbling in as well. So he's doing a special, I think, next season on mega churches, and they had heard about our protest of Pastor Jeffress, which was his sermon titled "America is a Christian Nation." So we went and protested the fact that that's misinformation, and not protesting his right to say what he wants at his own pulpit. And I think most atheist groups would be, vehemently
and just to give some people some more information about this, because this wasn't just your run-of-the-mill sermon. I mean, he had billboards throughout the city. He was inviting people out, and this was kind of a big deal in the city area if you lived there, because it was a clear, in the state of Texas in particular, you have a lot of churches that are quite fairly large and have a lot of different members and have a lot of different resources. And sometimes that separation that we're talking about, separation of church and state, gets violated without people realizing. And there's kind of these checks and balances that are being put in place by groups like yours to kind of, help that out.
And, so he has the right to say what he wants and to spread misinformation, even if it's damaging. But we do have the right to stand next to him and educate people on why he's wrong and why it is damaging and terrible. And then what was also particularly scary was during the sermon, he read a letter from Mike Pence, vice president, who was basically endorsing this sermon of America as a Christian nation. And it's just, that was extra terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm super glad that you're here. I'm glad that you get to talk to us about it today, because I wanted to talk a little bit before we get into the calls, because you are our first female guest on Truth Wanted. And I think that is a big deal, because there's a lot of people in our movement who feel like there's not a lot of diversity sometimes, and I definitely feel that way. I remember I went to the American Atheist Convention this year, and I loved going there. It was a great time, but it was a lot of people that looked like me. Actually, even mostly people older than me, I should say, but they're, straight white guys, and that's a thing. That's a talking point. People talk about it, and it gets played over and over and over again. But there is truth to it. There is
absolutely,
something there. And I want to kind of talk about, because you're a president and you have a lot of power in your position, and like what your experience has been like, with these different identities. Like, do you feel like as a woman in the movement you have a place at the table? Do you feel like your opinion is as valid, or do you think that there's still some kind of tensions there?
I think it is just as valid. There is still a level of like male interruption of women that you do see in any community. I don't think that's special to the atheist community. But I do find that the equality of having a platform is pretty good, especially compared to obviously like religious groups, a lot of religious groups. And so there's that, which is really nice. I think that being a minority in the movement, you don't always see yourself being at the level of certain people. So that starting to shift and change is really good. And then actually I am also part of another channel. It's a group of women who've gotten together to just have conversations live on YouTube called Women of Deconversion. And it's hosted by Secular Hangouts, which is really good. It's just a bunch of women who have either been cradle atheists or most of us have deconverted from Christianity, and we'll do topics about our deconversion or sex education. We did a topic on, and it's really fun. So lately we're doing a topic, a different 7 deadly sin for each month.
Yeah,
so it airs at about 6 or 7 p.m. on YouTube Central Time, the first Monday of every month. So that's what we do.
That's awesome. Well, I think we need to go ahead and get to the calls, because we have 5 calls on the line tonight. That is super exciting, especially starting right off the bat.
Yeah.
Just a reminder, if you do want to call into the show, I like to say that this isn't exactly an atheist show. This is a show that we just kind of talk about all kinds of beliefs. And so if you have a belief and you want to talk about it with me or my guests here tonight, go ahead and call the number on the screen. Again, that's 512-686-0279. And I'm looking at that with our nice little Truth Wanted mugs here. That's really great. But I'm going to go ahead and get the first call. Are you ready?
Yeah, just real quick, I didn't really get to the, like, why I'm... What my topic is, basically.
Oh, yeah.
Just so callers know.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because I do want to introduce just a little more in the future when we do these Truth Wanted episodes, a general theme with our guests and their level of expertise and stuff. And you actually do have some credentials.
Yeah. So I have a bachelor's in psychology. So a lot of the things that I talk about are sort of within that frame of mind. And I have been part of the movement for about 8 years, so it's kind of a hobby of mine to listen to debates and speakers and things. But that's usually the framework that I work within is psychology. So
yeah,
if anybody has anything about that, could be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I definitely, for sure. If you have questions about the psychology of beliefs, because like beliefs are kind of the structure, the main thing that we like to talk about, or just any question in those realms, Courtney is here and can definitely answer those for you. But let's just go ahead and get to our first call, shall we? So let's get to Karen, who is in California. Karen, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi, Dan.
Hey,
hi,
Karen.
Courtney.
How's it going? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I talked to you a couple weeks ago, and you said to give you a call back, and we could talk about psychic stuff.
Oh, that's right. Yes. So just
guess what I
guess what
I have in my hands right now.
You have some tarot cards, don't you? tarot cards.
I do.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yes.
I was going to do it. In fact, Courtney might be interested in this too, because tarot cards have a psychological element to them. And I've been reading them since I was 10. And I was going to do a reading for you or Courtney right online, and you can read epistemology me.
Oh, that's so great. That is so awesome. I am super ready.
I'd be curious. I'd be curious what psychological component you were referring to with the tarot cards.
Yeah, absolutely. And would this be okay with you guys?
Yes, I'm 100% down. Are
really
you kidding me? That's amazing. Let's do this.
So as I do it, I will talk about the psychological elements. And I was a complete true believer. And before I get started, Dan, I just wanted to give you a big compliment on your talk with Ocean that was broadcast the day after Thanksgiving, because I spent 26 years as a polytheist priestess. And I did Druid stuff, and I was on a heathen Nordic path. And I thought you guys did a terrific job in describing everything and asking questions.
Yeah, so those of you who aren't aware, last week I had Ocean come on, who is a polytheist, also identifies as pagan, heathen, among other things. And I actually had him not as a caller, but as a guest host. And that was one of the proto episodes we did for Truth Wanted. And I wanted to release that as content for last week because it was Thanksgiving break and stuff. And I agree with you. I think it was a really great conversation. And I think it's cool to just kind of talk about that kind of stuff, because as far as I know, most of the other shows on this network don't get to talk about that kind of stuff in the depth that we did. And so I'm glad you got to relate to that and hear more about that. But man, Karen, I gotta tell you, I'm excited. You gotta get me a reading here, and we need to talk about this. This is so cool.
We will.
Yeah.
So either you or Courtney decide which one you want. I do both, but it would probably take longer.
Rock, paper, scissors.
One. I could always. Yeah.
Well, you seem to be really excited about it.
I am really excited, but
I have had tarot.
I think tarot is the pronunciation.
Oh yeah,
right?
Tarot.
I have had a tarot reading when I was in India, so
I've never had it done before. But
I think
you are a guest. If it's your call.
No.
You don't want. Okay, if Courtney doesn't want to do it, then I'll go ahead and do it, because I gotta tell you, I'm pumped. Let's do it.
So I want you to think of a question, Dan, and it should be something that is non-trivial or something kind of important to you. And you can either tell me what the question is or not tell me, and I'll do my best to tell you what it is. Now, just to let you know, I never did this for money. I don't do cold reading. This was part of my spiritual path, and all the readings I've given in my whole life have been for free. So this is where I think street epistemology and atheism falls down on reaching people that are into the so-called woo, is that for some of us, this does seem to work. And Courtney, I think it's a psychological thing, but again, we can talk about that later.
Yeah,
so Dan, think of the question.
Okay, so any parameters to this question? Just like any...
it could be any kind of parameters, but it should be non-trivial, like what color socks should I wear on Christmas?
Okay.
You don't want to ask that question.
Okay, so non-trivial, like not what colored socks, but it has to be, okay, this is interesting. I've never been asked to think of a question like this.
She said something kind of important to you, right?
Yeah, okay.
Something important, like something about your family or something about maybe your job or something, or your love life. Okay. It could be anything like that.
Okay, I have a question in mind then. Okay.
Okay, so now I'm going to shuffle the cards, and I am going to try to tap into the weird. The weird is a term in Nordic mythology where everything is considered connected. So like all the stars, the sun, the moon, the earth, and all the people on it, all the creatures on the planet are interconnected in a web of life. And I'm going to try to tap into the weird and see if I can connect to you through this network and see if I can do a reading on your question.
All right.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, normally I would have you touch the cards and you cut the cards, but you're not here, so you're going to tell me how many piles should I cut the cards into?
I'll touch it with my mind, but let's go ahead and say 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good Nordic number. 3 wishes, 3, all 3.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first card I'm dealing out is and I'm sorry you can't see it. I'll take a photograph for you and send it to you later.
Okay.
The first card I'm dealing out is the question card. And the card that covers it is the one that's kind of hiding the situation a little. The next card is going to be the card that crosses the situation. And the reading that I'm doing is called the Celtic Cross method. Okay, and then there's a past, a present, a near future, a far future, Wow, you got some heavy cards in here. And then there's the self, the surroundings, the hopes and fears, and the outcome. And if the outcome is a major arcana, which it is, I can stop there. If it wasn't, I would deal till I got a major arcana. Okay, so the first card that I see here for your question, I actually have the Ice Queen here. So this is like the Priestess of Swords, and the picture I'm seeing is a very cold woman who is sending out an owl of wisdom. Okay. Now, these are all done with pictures, and this is what I was trying to tell you, Courtney, about it being psychological. These are kind of like Rorschach tests where you look at them and you see what. Right. But a lot of people believe that the spirits and the gods help in this sort of thing. So, and since I'm connecting through the weird, you can actually be a secular pagan, and I'm not one, and I'm not even a pagan anymore. But earlier today, I did a secular reading, and it actually worked. So there you go. So I don't know if your question. Did you want to tell me a question, or you want me to just keep going, Dan?
I want you to keep going, and I don't want you to see if you can even get anywhere close to what I'm thinking of.
Okay, you're on. All right. So normally, when getting back to the psychological component again, even though I did not do cold reading, when the person was there with me, I could see the expressions on their face. Now, your expressions are delayed. I'm looking at you right now on my iPad, and it's delayed, so I have no idea what this is about. And, Courtney, for you, I did read an article about divination being done in Japan, and they said that the Japanese love to get readings because it was a way of having socially acceptable psychology. So, in other words, a Japanese person might not go to a counselor, but they would go to a tarot reader or someone else doing palmistry or something like that.
Okay.
So, so I got this woman here. So it would indicate that there is a strong woman in your circle, and a priestess indicates she is a religious person. Okay. She is a religious person, but she's kind of on the cold side. It's not that she's mean, but she's just very, very. What's the term I'm wanting to use? She's just very irrational. Okay. Now. This is covered by the daughter of swords. That's interesting. So there might be a family member, a daughter or a cousin or a niece who's kind of fighting against this woman and just feels really frustrated about. Maybe this is I can see delayed motion, so maybe this is referring to not exactly directly to Dan. I don't know. Anyway, she's fighting against having a little bit of an argument. But what she's actually fighting against is more of her own imagination take on what's happening as to what is opposed to as what is actually happening. And she feels like she has to sacrifice something. She's not real happy about that. Okay. Then prompting the question, did you want to ask a question?
Do you have one more card you got to read, right? And then you asked me about that.
I have a lot of cards, so just jump in and ask any questions.
Okay.
If you want, I'll try to speed it up to give you a general overview.
Gosh, it's so much information. I don't know how. I mean, obviously you've practiced at this and you're keeping all this stuff in your head. I would have a hard time. I'd look at the card and I'd probably be like, it's some lady. I don't know. She's doing a thing like.
Check your encyclopedia.
I'm wondering, so when people are studying this stuff, is this something that you're actively having to practice so you can come up with the right kinds of predictions, or what does that even look like to even get all this information?
Okay, well, like I said, I've been doing this since I was 10. Mm-hmm. That means I've been doing this for over half a century. That's a long time. But what happens is while I'm reading the cards, the person sitting across, I figured this out because, as you know, I'm now an atheist and I don't believe in this stuff. But as I'm reading the cards, I am actually interacting with the person, and they will do kind of like what happens on John Edward, where, that must be my aunt or that must be my cousin or something like that.
So you're waiting for me to give you some clues.
Right.
And you're...
No, I'm really not.
Okay.
You would volunteer it yourself if you really believed it, okay? But the fact that you're not giving me clues doesn't usually affect it, because what's happening is when I get, let's just say you don't recognize it. Then I said, well, maybe this is the anima, the part of your inner self, your female self that feels this way. Right. You were once religious, and then now you're not. Yeah, you see how it works?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
but you mentioned that you don't do cold reading, but to me that does sound like cold reading, just because you're presenting a certain, I guess, situation where you're posing questions and you're presenting ideas and then seeing the reaction you get back, and that by definition is cold reading, where you're sort of reading the response and gauging what you're saying in order to see if you're on the right track and sort of like go on that tangent. And I don't know how much of that is conscious by true believers, but if someone isn't a true believer in what they're doing, that's definitely a technique that's used in not only this venue but also sales and any sort of.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. The reason I wasn't calling it cold reading is that there's two different kinds of tarot card readings. One is fortune telling, where you sit there and you tell somebody what's going to happen to them. But the one that's being used on the spiritual path is done in conjunction with the person who wants the reading. So the theory is, because they're not paying money, so they want something out of it. Everybody wants something out of something. So they're not trying to, pay for something and then have the reading done. They're asking for help. And this is a type of counseling, just like I was commenting on the Japan thing. Now, I have done these with no feedback whatsoever and was later told it was accurate. So I don't know what was happening there.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things that could be going on there. There's the pattern-seeking nature that we humans have of trying to make sense of random things that happen and reading into ambiguous information like horoscopes or seeing an agency there, to where you read a horoscope, it could be a random one, but you could still kind of see yourself in there, and they're written on purpose to be kind of vague and fit a lot of people. But the thing that worries me about it being used as counseling is I'm assuming that a tarot card reader isn't a licensed counselor. And so if there's a legitimate problem that is needing to be addressed in someone's life, not only are they coming to this in, as opposed to seeking an actual counselor who could give them some techniques to sort of figure out their own psychology or figure out a solution to what they're dealing with. But the other side of that is that if they do find a solution, it's not... it's sort of despite the ambiguous nature of this, that it can help them to get to their own conclusion, but it's not dealing with the problem or a real solution directly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with you. And that's the reason why these things are so dangerous and why I myself had a lot of problems. Dan will tell, if he remembers, he'll tell you that I was having problems with some of these healers that were not really healing at all. But I do want to address something important, why people come to tarot card readers and alternative healers. I don't know about the rest of the country, but I do know as far as here, like let's say I needed a counselor, it would take weeks for me to get on to talk to a counselor here in California with my HMO. And it would be very expensive. Now, tarot card readers generally have been charging in this area $60 an hour. That's $1 a minute. But going to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist would be $180 plus. And so some people come to tarot card readers because by the time they get to see psychologists, they've already had their crisis and are probably just wallowing in it. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out is that you both know a lot of people go to religion and spirituality for comfort when they can't get it where they're supposed to get it. And I know that's not our problem to solve this issue, but I just want to point out why it happens. It's a two-pronged problem. It's not just the woo, but it's also not being able to get the help through the medical system.
Right, yeah. I just would worry about people using it as not entertainment, but using it as an actual tool for mental health. Because
you're right.
It does cost less and it takes less time, but it's not as helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
No, it isn't.
That's
And
really
it's still
scary.
paying $60 an hour.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
Type of
I mean,
robbery, in
to
my
me,
opinion.
that's like a massage, or really, I guess I think some people would consider it like you're supposed to consider gambling in Vegas. It's like entertainment. You're paying for entertainment.
Well, Karen, I want you to keep up with this reading here, and let's see where we can go from here. But gosh, maybe you need to guest host Truth Wanted sometime, because it sounds like you know a lot about this topic, and I'd love to pick your brain on this more. But let's go ahead and finish this reading up, because I'm antsy about this. I need to know. I need to know about me and what's going on. I know you have the power.
All right,
so
I did think I did. Okay, so I'm going to go on. I'm going to try to abbreviate it, because they're, like you said, there is a lot. And when people do these readings, they usually do last about an hour. And I know we don't want to go to that route.
Oh yeah,
So
no, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. We do have other callers, but that would be cool.
That's right.
Maybe someday we can dedicate an episode to it, though. That'd be interesting.
So crossing the question is a card of community, at least the way I read it. It's the 10 of Cups, and there's people that are very happy. They're joining in worshiping together. And it doesn't necessarily have to be worship, but if it's in regards to the question, it would have something to do with the fact that maybe this cold woman is not really participating in the community as a group, and that's something she might want to look at, or if that's part of you. And I don't see you as being unsocial, so I don't think it would have anything to do with you. In the past, I see that there was a lot of love and tenderness. This is the 6 of Discs between two individuals. And I see that as the family expanded, again, I'm just sort of reading blind here. I'm not looking at you. I'm just telling you what the cards say. As the family expanded, there were a lot of changes that were going on, and it led to a sort of change within the dynamic of the colder woman, her niece, and the community. And that was the Death card, so that's a pretty significant card. And then the more far, and that's the present. So the present feels like a kind of death. And the outcome card, or not the outcome card, but the farther future, I see 3 people fighting with swords. So they're pretty unhappy that this dynamic has changed within the community. Now, of course, this could apply to anybody now that I'm thinking about it, but this, I'm just telling you what the cards say. And also just want to make a comment that a lot of the tarot cards are based upon a magical order called the Golden Dawn, and they did purposely try to make the cards archetypal, which is things that people go through all the time. Then I'm just going to give you the last 4 cards briefly. The next is the Priestess of Cups, and that is a very warm, loving woman who maybe is sort of leading the questioner, you, away from this cold background that did not really fit your particular lifestyle or needs or wants. The Second of Discs is now it's the Self card. So the Second of Discs is the Surroundings card. Again, that's a 2, like a lot of the numbers in here, and 2 would be like a significant number of. I see technology in this. So the Surroundings is a technical environment, but I see that you are trying to maintain that relationship with the family or the community, and you're doing a very good job of it. And the Surroundings with the Hopes and Fears is the Crone. The Crone is an old woman, and on this card, she has the choice of 3 different paths. So this means that you might have some opportunities where you hope to have opportunities where you have more things that you can do going forward, but you hope that you won't be stuck with the decision-making process. And then the outcome is the Star, which is probably the best card you can get in a tarot reading, meaning that everything's going to work out fine, that you have strength, and you will be able to handle the situation with all these different people that are causing conflict. And you may not be able to solve everyone's problems, but your problem will be, in the end, solved by your own consciousness and volition. And that's it.
Okay. Wow. Okay, so is this the part where I reveal to you what the question was? at the beginning, or?
If you want to. If
Okay.
you want to. See, since this is a spiritual reading, or technically it's supposed to be a spiritual reading, you could just keep it to yourself and mull it over. But if you want to reveal the question, go ahead and let's see how accurate or inaccurate I was.
Okay. My question was, why did my brother choose to go to Baylor University of all universities? That was my question. So it seemed like for half of that, it almost didn't really, at least the first half, it seemed didn't really apply because you were kind of talking about me, and it was like, well, I was more thinking about my brother. So maybe I asked the question wrong. Maybe it was supposed to be more about me. I don't know, but
No.
But
No, it's the question is right.
Okay.
The question is right. And if you had been here and if you had revealed that to me, I would have said that this young woman was actually your brother and he was trying to get away from home. Okay.
Okay.
But since you didn't, and if you had really been into it, you might have actually thought that. But the real bottom line is these don't work, okay? They might work great. They might. And I really believe they did for a long time, and I kept trying to make them work. I've had terrible tarot card readings. I've had readings where one woman told me that I worked, she told me that I worked with children in social work. Well, I didn't. I worked in IT. I worked with computers. I had nothing to do with that. And I had another reading where one woman, it was a palmistry reading. She kept insisting I had a son. I've never had children, so it's not possible for me to have a son.
Oh, wow.
So her whole reading was based on that.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So even then, that's me also trying to make the reading work. I was like, well, maybe I should have asked a different question. Right? So like that just naturally happens when you're looking into these things, because I guess humans like to make patterns and they like to figure stuff out. And
and like making decisions is hard.
Yeah, and like Karen was saying, the more you actually believe in this this technique, the more you're going to want it to work and to want to help the person who's reading, get a sense of what you're trying to accomplish, and you want to learn from them, and you want to get as much information from the cards as you can, so you're going to participate as fully as you can. So because of that, you're going to be looking for things that match what you're seeking. And so you're going to read into anything that you can to be that advice that you want to see, which, so as Karen was saying, the psychological things at work, definitely confirmation bias, definitely, our pattern-seeking psychology, and just, also that sense of like community of wanting to not disappoint the person that's reading you as well.
Yeah.
If you want it to be true and you want them to help you in this search that you're on, then you want them to be right and you want them to have something valid to say.
That's so true. And that last part you said, I want to emphasize, you want to preserve that sense of community, and you want that reading to be right, and you don't want to offend the person giving you that reading. Even people who are skeptical, I find you can come into a conversation like that, and naturally you want to help out the reading out, help to see where it goes and stuff. And it's so interesting how, how our kindness can be taken advantage of in that way. Because I know a lot of people who can read into things that aren't really there because they want to, build the kind of narrative structure to their lives maybe, and try to see that there's a grand design or vision going on, and there's curtains being pulled behind the scenes. But wow, that's so fascinating. Karen, I'm so glad you got to call and do that. That was really, really cool. How did that feel doing that again? Did you feel like you were bringing up good or bad memories, or is this something that you could just do off the fly?
Well, I'm so practiced at it that I even did it for a group of atheists at the Reason Center here in Sacramento. It's just so easy. But I'm sad. I'm sad because I miss my religion. But I'm also happy that I'm no longer a prisoner of these bad ideas. And part of the reason I'm calling you and why I try to call in is I really would like to let people know that paying $60 for someone for a reading is really not a great way to spend your money for entertainment. It would be better to spend $10 on a movie. And I agree with what
$10 on a Patreon donation, maybe. Just putting that out.
Oh yeah, $10 on a Patreon donation for this show. And I agree with Courtney. This is really dangerous. If someone's feeling depressed and suicidal, the last thing they should be doing is going to a tarot card reading. That is not going to help at all. I mean, they might feel good for a while, but that person is not a licensed therapist.
Yeah, there's always better ways to talk about these kinds of beliefs, and there's just always going to be better ways to find the truth to some extent, right? I mean, like, I had to agree with you. The things that I see where people get tricked into these crazy ideas, or what's crazy from our perspective, seems very real to the person who, is believing these kinds of things. So it's hard to have these conversations, and it's hard to tell people, hey, this is actually like wrong, because there's these structures in our mind that get built up that can be shattered by all this. And so you're really hitting at the heart of why I started Truth Wanted in the first place. It's okay, let's figure out ways we can talk about this and see like why we believe and why we don't believe in the things that we believe and don't believe. And I'm glad that you have kind of woken up to this yourself, and you've kind of gone through this transformation. It made for an excellent call, and it sounds like you're helping other people out in your life too. So it's really awesome. Really, really awesome.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to let you go so we can get to some other callers. But Karen, if you ever want to call again and do some other kinds of fancy psychic tricks that you know of, I'd be happy to try it. I mean, that was really fun.
Yeah. If I'm here, we can analyze.
Okay, awesome.
We can analyze it all out.
For sure.
That sounds wonderful. And you take care of yourselves now. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Wow, that was awesome. First tarot card reading on this show. I wonder if the first one in this studio. I don't know if any other shows have done that here with the ACA network.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, that's you're probably right. I wouldn't doubt it too. But hey, that was cool. I enjoyed it. Kind of get a little bit of how these kinds of techniques work by someone who used to do it. I mean, that's interesting. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, I went when I went to India. I went with like a group of people that were a little bit into the woo, and so I think it was just sort of part of the social environment to just sort of participate. And I was a Christian believer at the time, so I didn't quite believe in it then anyway. But I don't know. It was really interesting. I don't remember if anything came out of the predictions that were made, but it's certainly an interesting way to bond with the person that's doing that, especially if it's just a casual friend of yours rather than like paying for a service. So. Yeah, for sure. Let's go ahead and go to our next caller. So this is interesting. This is caller's name is the Reverend Point Blank. But from what I understand, Reverend, you are not actually a Christian yourself. Is that right?
Well, I used to be until I found out how dismal and confused and Hippocratic the whole system was. And, I can tell you exactly how it happened, but I do not. First of all, let me just give a heads up to you, Dan. I appreciate your patience. You have a lot of patience, and my patience doesn't run that thin. And Courtney, I definitely appreciate your experience, and I can feel your power, the energy that comes from you, and I feel like you are committed to your work. And saying that, as you are as well, Dan, and saying that brings me to the point that most of these people have no idea when the fact of the matter is laying right there. You're saying truth wanted. I'm saying truth is needed. And that is the bottom line to the whole structure of what life is. Now, I had to ask the spirit of God, because it's a spirit. Now, Courtney, you have a spirit. I can feel it. Dan, you have a spirit. And Karen just gave us a tutorial about the tarot cards. I appreciate that. But she didn't really tell us anything that was relevant, basically, to me. Now, maybe it was relevant to someone else. So my point is this. Just imagine it. I get off the train when I'm in London, and I step off the train, and I'm looking at this plant. And the plant is beautiful. And I'm not a botanist, but at 20 minutes, I'm looking at it. Now it's 70 degrees, and the sun is shining. And I automatically ask myself, I say, I wonder what kind of seed it comes from. And when I asked myself that, I was soaking wet. I walked across the street into the hotel, checked into my room. The guy, they was looking at me stupid. When I walked, my shoes were squishing. I don't know where the water came from. I have no idea to this day. But I went up to the room. I took off all my clothes. I sat down by the desk with the pen and the glass with the little thing, and I started writing. But I had my eyes closed. And I wrote. Halfway through what I had written, I knocked the glass off the table, and then I jumped up and had a spiritual orgasm.
Ooh.
Blew me away. So then I sat back down and I finished writing. Now, after I got done writing, I opened my eyes. I'll tell you what I wrote. I wrote, the best that life has to offer is right now, this minute. In a moment, it will be gone, never to return again. The second part I wrote was, your words and your deeds are your seeds. The hearts of people is the different ground. What's in their head is the weather. But you have to know what it is you want to grow in your life. And most people have no clue because they're following TV, they're following the news, they're following their family, following their church. And they don't have, they spend 24 hours doing everything else, and they don't even spend an hour with themselves, taking an inventory. Who are you? Where are you going in life? What is your gift? I mean, I did a lot of comedy before.
Yeah, Reverend, I just want to ask you real quick. When you're talking about this spiritual experience that you had, do you attribute that experience to some sort of higher power? Do you think there was a God kind of channeling that in you, or are you using spiritual in like just a metaphorical sense?
No, I attribute that to my experience.
Okay, cool.
I attribute that to the things that I had seen. I've traveled to many countries, to the people that I've talked to, even not speaking that language, I was able to communicate with them because their spirit. I grew up in Cabrini Green, in Chicago. I mean, my thing was, when I was there, I couldn't speak the language, so I had to feel their energy, the spirit of what they do, when they smile and how they smiled. But at the same time, somebody could come up to you and from the hood and say, hey, this, that, and the other, and they're saying one thing, but the spirit is meaning something different. They want to revive you.
So just to clarify just a little bit, because you're using this rich, like, religious language to describe these kinds of experiences, which I think is wonderful, but it can be a bit confusing if we're not being super specific. And when you're saying like the spirit of this people, are you just talking about just their general outlook? Like you can just tell based on like body language and stuff that something else is going on? Or do you think there's like a soul, like a spirit that's giving off an energy that you can read? Is there any like specifics to this or?
Well, what it is this. I have a child in Africa. And he's a bushman. So I was in the bush in Kilimanjaro, Tanzania, and I didn't speak the language, but, when I woke, I married this girl, and I had a doctor flown in, took another 45 days, came back. We all came back, and that night we spent together. I didn't bother her, but the next morning, we sat at the table, and when I looked into her eyes, and I put my hand out, she touched my hand. When I reached over to kiss her, she kissed me back. And it just led to that connection the whole time. Now, I don't know that there is a God, but I do know that if I plant apple seeds on the ground where the ground is good and the weather's right, I'm not going to get oranges. I'm not going to get bananas. I'm going to get apples. I know that if I plant lies, it's going to be a tree of it. That I know. I don't know who did it, but it keeps me alive.
So
it's the very essence of nature that keeps me alive. So
can I just ask you something real quick?
Sure.
I think that atheists can connect with what you're saying in terms of you sort of connected on a human level with the person that you were with, and sort of having an emotional closeness, and it can feel transcending, and it can be transcending from a secular context. But so you're talking about a connection you had with another person, and then you're talking about the certainty of the way that the laws of nature work, of the seed of one thing is going to grow that one thing, and it's predictable, and it's reliable. So I wasn't sure how those were connected.
Yeah, you're right about a few things, because the laws govern the earth, and I'm talking about the law of gravity, the law of nature. Those things govern the earth. Those things keep us alive. If it wasn't for the fruits and vegetables, the oxygen, and all those things, we wouldn't exist. So when we die, we go back, our flesh goes right back to the ground, and over thousands of years, somebody's going to be eating apples from us.
Right.
So I don't care how it works, but I know that that's how it works. And from whoever created it, I really don't care about that, because when they talk about Jesus, there's so many different things that are wrong, that don't make sense in the Bible, in all these different books. I'm not even bothered with that anymore. I'm gonna call my God truth.
You sound like a humanist. Have you ever encountered that term at all?
No, I don't. Well, I think I've heard it, but I didn't get into it because, again, this is the bottom line. The bottom line is, while you're out there going and doing, if you don't have a perspective or some knowledge about why you're on this planet, you're liable to fall into anything.
Yeah.
If you don't know why you were created based on taking an inventory of yourself, like a store, trying to find out what's selling and what ain't selling, if you don't know, haven't done that, then you will be subject to anything and everything. If you don't know why God made you, if you want to call him God, then you just being moved, how they say, tossed by the sea and the wind. I use the scripture because it's so messed up, Well,
and
so I have to use it so they understand it. Go ahead.
I would say you are kind of mixing a couple of things there, where if you don't have a sort of moral foundation or a set of values, then I guess we would probably agree that you're able to be, you're kind of susceptible to things in a negative way. But the concept of a higher power creating you for a purpose isn't necessarily, it's not completely necessary for everybody in order to have a set of values and something that guides their life and something that gives their life meaning. So if you don't have a purpose that is outside of you, that's basically being imposed on you in certain religious contexts, rather than, at least for me, secular humanism, I found was a better value system for me, and I think for the world, because rather than there being this sense of a creator having a black and white set of morals that gives you a set of guidelines that you don't have a reason for, you have a sense of good and bad, but they're kind of imposed on you and you're not given a reason. It's sort of a because I said so kind of thing. Morality ends up being the result of crime and punishment, of like punishment versus reward, versus a secular humanism perspective of having a value in humanity for its own sake, not because we're children of a certain God, as opposed to others or no God, but also a set of moral guidelines that are based on the effect we have on each other, and again, acting moral because we all have to share this planet and we're here for a short period of time. So at least for me, I really love secular humanism for the hope that the world is the way it is because we made it that way, good and bad, and we have not only the responsibility to make it better and to leave it better than we started it with,
absolutely,
but also we have the power to do that because it's just us.
Yes, we do.
And so that's been really exciting for me.
Let me say this to you. See, this is the fact of the matter. Death is guaranteed, life is not. But what is guaranteed is I don't know John F. Kennedy, I don't know Martin Luther King, I never met Malcolm X, I never met Harriet Tubman, but I know something about them because they left a legacy of who they were.
Right.
And if a person doesn't search that, they'll be a pawn in the whole scheme of things. So all these people who are claiming this God this and God that, and they have no idea because they haven't stopped to look inside themselves and say, who am I? I'm not saying that God, maybe we evolved from apes. I don't know that. I don't really care about that. But the fact is, I know what I see, I know what I'm capable of, and I know what sustains me. And I know that I have the ability to do whatever I want to, but I need to know what that is. Otherwise, I'm going to pay or get paid for my choices.
Man, see, we got a reverend on here that's not preaching Christianity. Sounds like he's preaching humanism.
Right.
Some people would say, Reverend, that what you have right now is the Holy Spirit talking through you, but
what do we do?
That's interesting, though, right?
Hey, Dan, that's another story. Because look, when I was in the church, they would start talking about, come by my house on a Honda. I see, and I would be like, wait a minute. Is there anybody going to tell me what this person just said? Now, I would have said this a whole different way, trust me, on stage. But I would, in this case, nobody's there interpreting that. In that Bible, their Bible clearly says whenever there's an unknown tongue speaking, there's an interpreter. But nobody ever seems to do that. They be jumping up and down, their dresses all up, breasts hanging out. I mean, they got the Holy Spirit. I don't get that.
Yeah. So and Courtney does too. I think we both came from a Christian background.
Yes, mine wasn't the speaking in tongues variety.
Mine wasn't either, but
it is interesting. The idea of like churches having this ambiguity, this like speaking in tongues, so that you can sort of interpret it however you like to. And the previous call we had on tarot cards, it's kind of a similar idea where you're coming to a church for meaning, and you're also finding all of this really eccentric, exciting behavior of speaking in tongues, and you want to participate, so you're going to interpret whatever positive ideas come out of that, even though it's completely not based in any sort of message.
I have done my fair share of working in church as well. And when you set up worship services, you're caring about which songs you're going to play. You're going to care about the message and matching thematically at the night. You're going to care about the lights. You're going to care about every single thing that goes on. And there is, like you're kind of saying, a bit of a performance that goes on with these sometimes.
Because at the end, they want some money. Yeah. And here's the problem. Most of them want money, and there's 500 churches within 3 blocks, and they all got different names for God, and they all believe they got the right God. That should tell you there's a problem right there.
Yeah.
And the fact that he got 2 cars, he got 3 suits, his shoes are shining, your rent ain't paid.
Yeah.
That's a problem with that.
Yeah.
Because that Bible clearly says take no money for your journey.
Yeah, I'm not as cynical. I don't think that everybody wants it for money. I know I certainly didn't when I was, in the college ministry and stuff, but I think there definitely are some who do, and that's really unfortunate. And it's hard to tell the motivations of people when you get down to it,
Well, yeah, and I'm not sure I would be on board with the comment of people in churches aren't really thinking about their lives and basing their ideas on some sort of like logic that they've come to about why they think this is true. For me, I believed what it did because I was indoctrinated in it, and it was the only thing I knew. But then once I started to value what was actually true versus what had meaning to me and what had tradition and comfort, that's when I kind of found my way to atheism. But that value system isn't the same for everybody. And so some people value their sense of tradition and family connection and these things more than whether it's true or not, or whether it compares to other religions.
Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that they haven't really thought about what they believe or what a moral person they're going to be. But I would sort of fault religions for having a very skewed sense of morality and not giving it actual moral codes to people, rather than is this sort of because I said so.
Yeah, for sure. This kind of authoritarianism.
To put it plainly, religion is a con game. It's just a con game.
Sometimes,
in my opinion. Now, there are people who go to church who mean well, and they want to do the right thing. But here's the preacher who takes their pain and takes their money and gives them all these falsities. I just don't. That can't be right. Knowing that he's going to have to pay for that because he planted that.
Well, remember what Karen was saying earlier. Karen really believed that she had powers when she was doing these tarot card readings. And I think people who are up there on stage, you probably know as yourself as someone who goes on stage, there is a certain power and authority that you feel when there is an audience in front of you. And that
confirmation bias of people connect with what I'm saying, and I must be actually channeling the Holy Spirit. So there's a lot of people who actually believe what they're saying. And it makes them even more effective in that way.
Yeah, for sure. So
it makes them more ignorant too.
Yeah, well,
absolutely.
That's why we talk about these.
Yes.
I'm not as quick to judge people's motivations because it's
hard to see.
You can't tell just from meeting them in the you can get vibes from people, but it's really hard to tell unless you're really in that person's head. But anyway, Reverend, this was an interesting conversation. Not where I thought it was going to go, but I do appreciate you calling.
Well, it's my pleasure. And again, I love the show. I've already subscribed to it. I think the people need to hear the truth.
Heck yeah.
And I believe you guys are setting up a platform where everybody can say what they want to say, period. Doesn't matter how you feel, and you will accommodate them. I'm just not that patient.
Yeah. Look, it takes practice, man. I mean, like, I've been on doing this show for just a little bit now, but I've heard a lot of interesting things on here, and sometimes you just want to be like, that's BS. But that's not really. I'm missing the point if I do that, right? If I'm the one, right. I always say that this is like the motto of the show. I'm not the one that's distributing the truth here. I'm the one who wants you to tell me what you think is true, and then we kind of talk about it a little bit. Because as soon as I'm the one that starts dictating what people should believe and how people should believe it, then suddenly I become kind of part of that problem too. So. It's a whole dynamic. But Reverend, thanks again for calling. I hope to hear from you again sometime.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And I certainly got that feeling from you when I was listening to you, listen to the things that were going on. So, Dan and Courtney, you guys really have a wonderful night, and I appreciate you having me on.
You too. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Wow, that was fun. I still don't know why he called himself the Reverend. But we got a call from him earlier today.
Really mad.
So I understand he's a comedian, and he has a channel where he does kind of stand-up stuff. He called in earlier today because he wanted to call into one of the shows, and we told him to plug into mine. So that's how I kind of knew about him before. That was a fascinating little expose there. Yeah. Very, very powerful words coming out of that man's mouth.
What's funny is we have this isn't particularly an atheist show, but I as a host of a lot of atheist venues and events, it can be difficult to have somebody talk negatively about religion in a way that I don't agree with, and to sort of like suss out, well, I agree with this part, but not quite that part.
Yes.
And you want to be respectful of their views, and they may be really bitter toward religion or have a different perspective, and that's completely respectable, but it can be interesting to have people meet me as an atheist or you as an atheist, and to think that we have these sorts of opinions about religion, and we're very different about lots of things like that.
Isn't that so interesting? And I don't think it's a topic that really comes up a lot in these conversations, but I see stuff on my Twitter all the time, atheist memes and stuff like that, where it's like, hey, I don't agree with that at all.
Right.
Like they'll tell some fact about the Bible or something, and it's like, hey, that's actually like not true. Like that's not how people see it. And it's like, wow, if we're doing the same things that the people we criticize so much are doing, what does that make us?
Well, but at the same time, I think it probably isn't at the same level. I think that the atheist community is not at the same like academic level, but it's similar to the scientific community, where people are held accountable for saying something negative or saying something inaccurate, and so that's I think we do sort of take people to task, especially online, and hold them accountable for saying things out of ignorance, and we are better for it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's go ahead and go to our next call. This is Joshua calling in from Richardson, Texas. Joshua, how are you doing?
Hi, how are you, Dan?
I'm doing
Courtney?
Fantastic.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, cool. So
Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, I heard that you are on a college campus and you want to get some advice.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm the president of a student organization at the University of Texas at Dallas called Atheists, Skeptics, and Humanists. So I'm really into skepticism, and as soon as I found out about street epistemology, I loved it, And I think one of our goals as an organization is to encourage skepticism on campus. And I think street epistemology would be a really good way to do that. But yeah, I'm looking for basically some advice on the best way to go about doing that.
Okay, so this is good because I gave a talk. Sorry, Courtney, this is a little bit more in my field here.
This is what I relinquished to you at the beginning of the show. I was I don't know much about this.
I gave a talk on this for the Secular Student Alliance this past summer about street epistemology and how you can do it on college campuses and stuff. I have a video of that. That's on my personal channel, Objectively Dan, if you want to get more information on that. But let me just give you like the basics of what I suggest for like college campus groups and stuff, or just any organization in general that wants to implement more SE. First of all, I say thanks for looking into it. I think it's a really good thing that you're doing it, but also understand that not everybody is going to approach it the exact same way. And kind of like what we were talking about earlier, it does take a little bit of patience. So I always suggest to people first, hey, try practice sessions of it first. And if you want to, do it with people in your groups, okay? And see what that looks like. See how these responses go. And if you can, try to give little feedback loops to the people that you're talking to. Say, okay, I liked how you approached the topic this way and that way and stuff, right? But maybe I would have done this or that or something like that, and kind of get that information. And also, I totally recommend you look up the other SE channels like Anthony Magnabosco and Cordial Curiosity with Reed Nicewonder and stuff, and see how those people are approaching those conversations, see the people who have done it before, and kind of copy them, honestly, like pick up the stuff that they're doing, because that's what they have those channels for. The other thing I would say, if you're doing it on a college campus organization level, make sure that, of course, you're checking in with the guidelines of the university and stuff, because there's different ways you can do it, right? You can set up a table and say, hey, we're this group on campus and we want to have conversations, right? So like free conversations and stuff. You don't have to do the video recording. Some people do, some people don't. But again, you got to take into account what your campus guidelines say about that kind of stuff. And, I'd say that the best thing is to do it with the approach and the intention of having conversations with people genuinely in the interest of their beliefs, and not through the proselytization of humanism or atheism or even skepticism. I mean, like, that's kind of an iffy, because you're kind of being skeptical and you're kind of wanting to employ some of those values, but just in the general interest of building good connections with people and letting people express their beliefs in avenues that they may not have been able to express before. Maybe even expressing some doubts about some things, or beliefs that they didn't realize that they had until they said out loud. I think that's kind of, the main goal you want to have with these conversations. So again, I have a whole talk about this that I do on my channel, which I definitely recommend you check out. But those are kind of the basic things I say to a group, and try to make it as organized as possible, try to make it as fun as possible. And I have more details on the specifics if you go check those out. But yeah, how does that sound for an answer to your question?
I think you basically touched on everything I wanted to ask about, but I'll ask for some more detail.
Cool.
One thing we were thinking about was, whether or not to do the recordings, because it's kind of an added burden for us to have to get a camera and deal with that. But there's also the benefit of being able to share the videos after the fact. And,
yes.
People have a better idea of what it actually is that we're doing if we're looking to recruit more of our club members to actually participate, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so the videos are an added bonus, I'd say. It helps when you want to reflect on your conversations and look back at them and say, I could have done this better or that better and stuff. I recommend that people do it if they can, but it's absolutely not a requirement. In fact, I wish there were more people that didn't do the videos so much, so that we're not just associated with videos, because I really think that people can use these conversational tools in all types of daily situations and stuff, as you probably know.
Okay. That's great. And I guess the other concern that I have, specifically relevant to being part of a student organization on campus, is that if we were to set up a booth kind of in a public space, one of the requirements is that we identify our club with signage of some kind.
Yes.
Which, if you watch Anthony Magnabosco or any of these others who are out doing street epistemology, and people ask, what is their affiliation, or what do they believe about the God belief, for instance, they usually try not to answer that question, mainly because it's not relevant to the discussion. And, it might damage the goodwill of the discussion, potentially.
Yeah.
So, the name of my club is Atheists, Skeptics, and Humanists. So that's just a concern that I had.
Yeah, so honestly, I'd say that this concern is actually a really big positive. And here's why. Let's say you're doing these conversations and other people are watching, and they see what that label is all about. And they see, these people aren't debating each other. They're not yelling at each other. They're just having a really nice conversation. And then they see the association with that name. If anything, I think you're building credibility, because you're saying, hey, we're this label that you've probably heard of before, atheist, skeptic, whatever. You've probably heard negative things before. But look, we're really not that. We're kind of these nice people who want to have conversations with others.
Yeah.
So if anything, I think that that's a net positive on you guys' part, that you get to identify yourselves. And that way, when people want to have conversations with you, when they say, hey, I saw this thing on campus the other day, what was that about? You know, they have a group that they can go to and stuff. So I can see why you might be worried, but I think it's a good thing in this case.
Yeah, I think that would be also why you would want to make sure that the people that are representing this have a lot of practice with it, because if you are coming off as having an agenda or being judgmental of someone, then not only will they not open up about what they really think about things, but it would sort of not be productive. And I know that you're trying to simply reach out to people and sort of get an honest feedback. So I think it probably gets easier over time as you practice. I haven't had much experience with it, but I know that Dan and Anthony are very good. So
some might say, I don't know.
Yeah, or at least very practiced. So it's something that if you study a bunch and you try and make sure that you maintain that distance from your sort of judgment of what they're saying, which isn't easy. It's not something everybody can do. If you can have representatives of your group be those kind of people that are willing to listen to things they really disagree with and not react in a negative way, I think that'd be an important component of that.
And just to add on to that, Joshua, I was associated, or I still am, affiliated with the Secular Student Alliance of Baylor University. I don't go to Baylor University, but I'm affiliated with their SSA. And the SSA at Baylor is actually not allowed to have signage of any sorts on their campus because they're not an officially recognized group at Baylor. They're not a fully chaptered organization because Baylor is a private Baptist university. So in that sense, it actually works to our disadvantage because the group could never actually go out and do SE stuff on campus with signs and things because they weren't actually allowed to. So I'd say, hey, at least you have the privilege to do that. I think it's a wonderful start, and I wouldn't let it be something to, discourage you from even going out there in the first place. I think it sounds like you really want to do it, and I think once people kind of see what you're actually doing and they get more comfortable, then I think you're going to find a lot of people are going to be interested, even despite, the labels that you have for your group.
Okay. That's really great advice. And yeah, I think I agree with you about the signage. So I'm glad you gave me that perspective.
Yeah. Awesome.
I think we're definitely going to try to do this upcoming spring. And and we've had that concern of making sure that the people who are out having the conversations know what they're doing and that they're not, doing a poor job of keeping their cool if somebody's disagreeing with them, or maybe, maybe the person that they're talking to is getting a little defensive, and we need to make sure we're doing the SE technique correctly and representing the club correctly as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
hey, when you do it, send me an email. Let me know. I'll come out there. I'll help you guys set up for sure.
Great.
Yeah.
You said you're in Dallas?
Yes, it's Richardson. It's pretty close to Dallas.
Okay, yeah. Because if you ever want to come out to the Metroplex Atheist events, we're on Meetup, and we'd love to meet you guys and connect with you because we've worked with the atheist group over at UT Arlington, which is closest to where we meet usually. But I'd like to come out and meet you guys. So.
Yeah. So my email is on the screen there. It's it's truth@atheist-community.org. It's also in the description of the videos and stuff, but definitely reach out to me. I'm close enough to where I could help you guys out for sure. Yeah. I'd love to do that. So, all right, Joshua.
Right. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for calling. That was a great call. And call again whenever you need more advice.
Okay. Maybe I'll call back after we've done it a little bit.
Yeah, that'd be cool too. We could talk about it on here even. I'd love to do that. So anyway, take care, Joshua. So sorry about that, Courtney. That was kind of in more, again, my realm of
I feel like I'm talking a lot already. So.
Yeah, well, no, it's been a really interesting show so far with the kind of stuff we're talking about. But it looks like we have one more call here on the line, and this is from Lynn. And I'm looking at your screen because my screen is not working right now. It's from Michigan. Lynn, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. How's it going?
It's going okay.
Cool. Well, what did you want to talk to us about?
Well, it says here that you created your own religion, Linism.
Well, it's kind of half jokey.
Okay.
I've been an atheist since I was a teenager.
Okay.
And I'm nearly 70 now. With some side trips into woo and new agey stuff. But anyway, my religion, if you want to call it that, has a mess. It has a silly rule, and it has an ethic. The only serious part is the ethics.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, just tell us a little bit more about that, I guess.
Okay, well, the myth is, before we were born, I'm assuming everybody, before we were born, we were in a place where our every wish was granted all the time. All you had to do was think of it, and it happened. Okay? And there's probably, you could call them people out there still in that kind of wishy world. But some of us got bored with that and said, I wish everything didn't happen when I wished for it. And that's why we're here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just to clarify, is this something you actually believe, or is this just a joke kind of thing? Like,
no, it's kind of jokey, except it's sort of like when life gets really hard, I think of it. Okay.
So
this is another experience.
Yeah.
You know?
So it's kind of a belief that gives you comfort when you think about it.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, but as far
I'm
as
not sure I would call it I wouldn't. It's not like a belief. Like I really believe this.
Okay.
It's just
kind of a narrative that kind of helps you get through the day sometimes.
It's a story.
Okay.
So is the comfort from that the sort of idea that that things aren't working out for you in one way or another because they're not necessarily required to, as opposed to there being some sort of thing you've done wrong and like a plan that you failed or something?
No, it's more like, well, if things really were perfect, I would be totally bored.
That makes sense.
So let's just
roll with the punches.
Whatever's happening for what it is.
Yeah.
Cool.
That makes sense.
Okay. Well, was there any other parts to this religion that you had, or was that?
I think she had two more parts.
Okay. The other part is a silly rule that really only applies to me, and that is don't eat anything with more than 2 legs or less than more than 4 legs or less than 2.
Okay. Anything more than 2.
It applies to.
So only eat 4-legged things, basically, unless there's a 3-legged thing out there.
Well, I've never encountered a 3-legged thing, so.
Could be. I mean, I've seen 3-legged dogs.
Like, yeah, 3-legged dogs
counts.
is what I think of.
Yeah. So I don't like fish, so that gives me an excuse not to eat fish.
Okay. So a dietary.
Okay. And
your religion has a dietary restriction, is what it sounds like. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and so like I don't like seafood and
right.
like
Shrimp have like a whole bunch
that
of
sort of thing. So that's like that.
Okay.
Anyway,
what's the final component?
That's a silly rule.
What's the final component to your religion?
The ethical part is 4 principles. They're not rules, but they're things that I try to accomplish every day or try to live by every day. The first one is honesty. The second one is empathy. The third one, creativity and curiosity.
Okay.
And
yeah.
Cool. I support that. Yeah. So were you calling just to kind of spread Leninism.
Well, I think
that's probably not the best
Leninism.
word for it.
The ethical part, I'd like to see more people do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you looked up the tenets of the Satanic Temple?
Satanic Temple. No, I really don't know much about that.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Heard of it, but
it is. They have, I think they're 10.
I'm
10 like moral tenets of the Satanic Temple, and I don't have them in front of me, but it's basically secular humanism and some much more sound moral codes than you would find in the Ten Commandments.
So let me try to, because this is a show where I like to ask questions about people's beliefs. So the first question that I ask, probably I'm most interested in, I guess, is this kind of moral theory that you've presented to us, these kind of moral principles, I guess. You've chosen specific principles. I mean, out of a list of principles, you've narrowed it down to a list of 5 or 6 or so. I don't remember. So, like, what is the criteria?
It's 4.
Just 4 of them. Okay, so, like, what is the criteria you had when choosing these principles?
Criteria. I'm not sure how to answer that.
Okay.
Or really, just how did you come to narrow it down to those specific 4 and why those 4?
If I can give you a little bit of history on it.
Okay.
When
go ahead.
when I was a teenager, I was very big into Ayn Rand, objectivism kind of stuff. And I mean, really, really big into it. Read all of the stuff I could get a hold of. I subscribed to her magazine. I mean, I was like total Rand head.
Really? Interesting.
And when Rand and Nathaniel Branden broke up, I was subscribed to their magazine at that time, and they had a big, I mean, it was a really big blow up. I think this happened in like 1965, something along that line. Mm-hmm. And it was totally traumatic to me. It was almost, I think of it as, it was like almost my parents having a messy divorce. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I really took a whole different look at the whole philosophy.
Of objectivism, you mean?
Of objectivism.
Yeah. So for those of you, I just want to inform the viewers who aren't aware of what you're talking about. There was a, some people debate whether she was, but a philosopher named Ayn Rand who came up with this philosophy of objectivism that she kind of wrote about, and in themes of her books like Atlas Shrugged and stuff. Some of you may have heard of that book, or there's a movie adaptation of it, I believe, who kind of gave a way of, it was simultaneously a moral theory and also kind of an economic theory. It was kind of a lot of different things pushed into one, and there was a movement of people back in the 60s or so and onwards of people who kind of followed this philosophy. I think I'm kind of giving the history, right? And you identified as one of these people.
Yeah, I did. But I was not, I mean, I couldn't be physically part of it. I was a teenager. I was at home. I was in Illinois, not New York, And anyway, when I reevaluated it, I rejected going on into my 20s. I continued kind of thinking about this, and I reevaluated the whole economic part and did a 180 on that, and became very liberal and very Democrat. Mm-hmm. And that's what I've been on that thing ever since.
So you discovered, what was I'm curious what your method was for kind of discovering that objectivism wasn't true in your eyes.
Well, I figured out that, and this is no great insight, I don't think, but I figured out that, number one, there's no such thing as a total individual. Mm-hmm. Okay? Nobody stands on their own.
Yeah.
Nobody grows up without help from somebody somewhere, at least parents.
Yeah. So
and nobody could live on their own on a desert island and have a life. I don't care, John Galt or Ayn Rand or any of those. Just, you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
You would not be a human being by yourself.
Yeah, so I want to clarify for the audience who isn't aware of some of these principles you're talking about. I know that Ayn Rand kind of talks about this idea of I'm not sure the phrase you use, but basically the individual self is like the primary thing you should be concerned about the most, and that everything in your actions should be helping yourself in some way, and that kind of plays into that moral and also economic philosophy we were talking about. And you kind of understood that this was...
and everybody's responsible for themselves. That there should be no social, any kind of socialism, any kind of altruism is bad.
You
should not do it.
That was my understanding of what she wrote. So you went from believing in this individual self as the primary thing you should care about to going kind of the opposite direction and saying that, no, you actually believe in kind of social welfare systems, maybe these kinds of systems of governance that actually do help people, maybe are a bit more altruistic in some sense. At least to a degree. And the older I've gotten, the more I think that way. And I'm my mind goes straight to I want to know why. Because Courtney and I know we've talked to people who are so intent on their beliefs, and then eventually someday they just go the other way, and they can cite different reasons for that. It sounds like you kind of had a bit of disillusionment maybe in your philosophy, and my brain immediately wants to go to, okay, well, what were the turning forces that kind of brought you away from that? Was it just you saw the philosophy in action and you didn't think that it went through with it? You thought there were flaws with it? Can you give me kind of a breakdown of what your mind went through?
Okay. The flaws in it. Well, I saw more and more, and this is on a personal level. I saw more and more how much we need other people. And how little, let's see how to say this right. Just how much people need people, how important community is, and just that you can't live alone. I mean, I live alone. I live in an apartment, but I live in a society that gives me clean water and electricity and education and all of that stuff that I didn't create.
Yeah. Okay. So your mind was kind of convinced by you didn't see this philosophy kind of in action. So if you wanted to know if objectivism was true, if you had to find a method of figuring out whether it was true or not, you'd probably have to find somebody who could work with the philosophy and truly be like an individual. But you're kind of saying that doesn't actually happen. People don't really operate that way. Is that right?
I don't think there is such a person.
Okay.
Because even though there are people that think they may be, total individuals, and are, totally self-made person, they're forgetting that person had a society behind them. They had schooling, they had education, they had parents, they had, society gave them a whole lot before they started out on their own.
So are you talking about sort of a tabula rasa kind of thing where people are sort of blank slates and then they're shaped by the culture around them?
To a degree. I wouldn't say totally blank slates. I think we start out with some things, but not enough. I mean, if you look at the children in Romanian orphanages, and what happened to them. I mean, or feral children who are, grow up in the woods somewhere.
Right.
They're barely human. They can't function.
Yeah, I've seen at least one documentary on this. These kind of feral children that kind of grow up some period of time without any human contact at all, and they can't speak languages. Like, they seem to be able to be kind of slowed down in their learning processes in some way, and it's scary to think of what that experience must be like to be completely by yourself. So, yeah, I think that's a great example, actually, of somebody kind of being completely on their own and what that does to somebody. It doesn't seem very healthy.
Yeah, there is a window of opportunity in terms of learning, especially language ability. We learned that from some really unfortunate cases, including what was called the Jean case, which was a young lady named Jean. Yeah. She, for those who don't know, she was raised sort of in a cage, and she was never spoken to. She was never potty trained.
She was isolated in a bedroom in the dark, and
sort of
her
like
father forbade anyone from talking to her until she was like 13 when she was found.
Yeah, and then I believe she died at 24.
I don't know what ultimately happened to her.
So she didn't have
but she was a very bright child, and when she was rescued, she was brought out of the situation. She learned words like crazy. I mean, she just ended up with a pretty big vocabulary, but no grammar.
Right. Well,
so she could not really communicate.
And from what I understand from the case study, there were a lot of limits to her learning ability. That there are certain windows of opportunity in age where you're able to develop fluency in a language. So that was a very interesting case that was very unfortunate. And in situations like that, you'd prefer it not to happen to anyone, but we do learn from it. And, obviously not an endorsement, but what was sad about that was that there was a limitation in that, and that's part of why we know that there are limitations to development when your environment is developmentally stunted. So that does play a major role in the trajectory of a person when they're given kind of proper nourishment and encouragement and all of those things.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
And anyway, in general, we, nobody can really raise themselves.
No man is an island.
To be part of a society.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I get that. Well, Lynn, your religion sounds pretty good to me. I like it so far. It sounds very altruistic. Sounds very nice. Sounds better than what you had before. It sounds like you're happy about it too. So that's always good to hear.
I'm pretty good with it, but just one question.
Okay.
I'd like to ask your audience or anybody that cares about it. Has anyone? I'm not sure if the myth part about living, in a place with no limits, with just every wish granted. I'm not sure if I made that up or if I heard it somewhere.
I don't know.
It is amazing how often that happens where we're like, did I make this up in my head? Or have I heard it? Yeah.
I don't think I've heard it before, but...
It did sound like the Children of the Corn kind of thing.
I can see you can say that, yeah.
It sounded... Well, there was a Twilight Zone in the original series around the 50s where there was a child who... If they didn't, it was kind of the opposite. If they didn't like something, they could wish it out.
Oh, yeah. Wish them to the cornfield.
To the cornfield, yeah. So that was an interesting. I thought of that when you mentioned it, but it's interesting how much we sort of take popular culture as much as previous religious beliefs, and you see that with personal accounts of UFOs and things. What people claim to see. based on their therapy they've gone through and trying to like recount what they've seen usually is very similar to what people have popularly seen in movies. And so it's
well,
incredible
I know I
how
did
like
see that
what we
Twilight
know is,
Zone as a child, so
yeah,
maybe so.
I did see that Twilight Zone as a child, so
I did
that
too.
influenced me.
Isn't that interesting how our memory can affect us in ways that we don't even consciously realize? If that's the case with your religious belief, I can't confirm it whether you stole that from somewhere or not, but I think that is interesting, probably something to look into.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing about creativity too. Things like music, when it's impossible to separate your own inspiration and creativity from your previous influences of music. You know, it's impossible to completely separate it and be completely original, which, you know, you don't necessarily need to be the most original thing in the world, but it is interesting how, you know, how that works and how we are unable to separate the influences around us, whether it's media and not even know what's influencing us, but it still does. You know, it's still kind of subconsciously affecting our ideas and our decisions and our creativity.
And believe it or not, sometimes the secular world even influences religion, if you can believe it.
Ooh,
some people don't say that, but I
would absolutely say
what
that.
was that? I didn't. What was that? I didn't hear that.
Well, there's this idea in a lot of religious cultures that say that we need to be separate from the secular world, and that religion kind of stays in its own world. But oftentimes those two things mix more so than some people like to admit. And I think a lot of religious ideas that we have now are actually quite modern inventions that didn't always exist from the source material.
Well, and especially the morality, you know. The moral stances they've progressed because of secular society having an influence on religious belief.
Yeah. Well,
religions have changed.
Yeah,
right.
I think so too. But
because we value community and being accepted.
That is so true. But I think we're gonna go ahead and try to wrap up the show for tonight. Thank you, Lynn, for calling. That was a really interesting conversation. And again, I like your religion. I think you should spread it. So keep up the good word.
Spread it. Okay. All right. I'll have to send some disciples out to prosper.
Yeah, sure thing. We'll see if it looks the same 2,000 years from now. But we'll get back to you on that. Okay. You have a great night.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Really, really fun.
Yeah. Well, she was asking on the chat if anybody else had kind of created their own personal religion, and it didn't seem like she sort of, you know, adhered to it completely or believed in the supernatural components of it. But I kind of find it interesting. I don't know how many people might have had their own religions. I know one of my girls on Women of Deconversion, Mrs. Snarky, she's got a history of like her family had their own sort of religious denomination separate from others.
Yeah.
Separate from everyone else.
If you come at it from the perspective of all religions are man-made, then it's not as weird when you think about it like that. Because I think when you hear somebody say, you made up your own religion, that's kind of funky. But I mean, like, secular humanism is a great example of that. That's a identity I use for myself. Right. Most of that I've adopted things from other humanist texts and various philosophical literature and things like that, and I kind of make that my own. I don't know how much of what I profess to believe in is originally mine. I think a lot of it probably comes from the things that I've read and stuff. So it's interesting when we say like, oh, I've made my own religion, but when you compare it to all the other kinds of principles that are out there, you know, how much can we really say is independent of our own? You know, it's a fascinating topic.
Well, and what sort of came to mind for me was beyond people creating their own like specifically named religion. I think everybody sort of creates, whenever they're in a religion, they create their own version of that for themselves. And you know, they'll kind of like have different values from the people within their own congregation or whatever it's called for them. And personally, I developed my own like understanding of the way that the world and God worked, so that I could reconcile some things that I didn't agree with religion.
So solving that cognitive dissonance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of justify things that don't sit well with you by, you know, and creating your own logic of why they make sense.
You know, and I'm going to go out there and say it, I think a lot of religious people end up doing that anyway, whether they consciously do it or not.
Yeah.
I don't want to say most because I have no way of measuring that, but I've definitely met my fair share of people who are Christians who have beliefs that definitely aren't Christians. Like I can't tell you how many Christians I've met that have a karma belief system, which is like really interesting. That's not. It wasn't in there. You know what I mean?
One of the callers, I think it might have been the Reverend, was talking about that the wrongdoing, they're gonna kind of like it's gonna come back to them.
Yes.
And I don't believe in that. Like it's just because it's a nice idea, it doesn't make it actually true.
You're right. He did mention that, and I almost wish we could have talked to him about that more. But there was a lot of ideas being thrown in that particular conversation. But those are the things that come up with people's beliefs. It's a mishmash, a patchwork religion, and maybe that's what personal religion means.
Right.
Maybe that's even if you say you're a Christian or you're a Muslim or whatever, I guarantee if you take 12 Christians in the same room, and they're all going to eventually say different things about each other if you ask them enough questions. So we have a crew camp that we want to go ahead and show real quick I'm getting a sign from some of the people in our audience to say to switch to it. So we're going to go ahead and see what this is about. It looks like we have, boxes of pizza? We got going on here? I can't tell, but that's our crew back there. That's
taunting us.
Some of the people that help out with Truth Wanted. I think they're telling me that they want to wrap up. And okay. So I just got word from my producer to see what this is about. This was a gift from somebody in our chat who sent us pizza.
Wow.
That is so nice. I don't know who sent it. They didn't tell me that part, but thank you, person who did that. Oh, Janet. Janet Reyes. Nice. Thank you, Janet, so much for giving us the pizza. I think that's a sign that we should go ahead and try to wrap things up here for tonight.
Yeah. I wasn't sure how long we're supposed to go, but I can keep talking about stuff forever.
I know. Usually about an hour and a half is pretty good, so I think we can kind of end it for tonight. But Courtney, thank you so much for providing your commentary and giving us a little bit of extra expertise in tonight's conversations. I think this was a really interesting show.
Yeah, I would love to do it again. It's fun to sort of be part of these conversations that are, really human. They're very basic to our humanity. They're concepts that we think about, and it's nice to kind of have a sort of communion in a way that we can't really have with religion anymore.
And for better or worse, every single week when I do this show, I'm gonna get calls that I have no idea what to expect on.
Yes.
And sometimes it gives me interesting insights. Sometimes it makes me just want to scream. But it's wonderful to have these kinds of conversations anyway, because, the world is crazy. Just when you think you know everything, just when you think you know how people are going to be and you can predict things, life throws a curveball at you, it seems, and you meet interesting people with all kinds of ideas. But until next week, when we talk to more people with those ideas, I'm going to go ahead and plug my show a little bit, and then Courtney's going to tell you where you can find her.
Sure.
So Truth Wanted, of course, is a production of the Atheist community of Austin, where you can find other great shows or the different channels. If you want to support this show, you should definitely subscribe. And I also have a Patreon where you could help make the show even better. I do not get a single cent of that money. That all goes to the AC to help improve the show and other shows like it. Definitely follow me on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan. I'm pretty active on there. We also have a Facebook group for Truth Wanted. You can look at that as well. And you can always email me at truth@atheist-community.org if you have comments, questions, ideas for the show, or you want to just ask me about something. That's the email that I look at. Courtney, what do you like on social media? Are you a Twitter person? Are you a Facebook person? What's your deal?
I'm technically on Facebook, but I don't really go on there very much, and I have never been on Twitter or Instagram. I don't know. I feel like a grandmother sometimes. But my group is on Meetup and Facebook, and we do have a Twitter account, Metroplex Atheists. I'm not sure what the Twitter handle is, if that's what it's called. I don't know.
Probably something along the lines there, yeah.
But I'm sure there's a link that's attached to the Facebook page. And so we, Metroplex Atheists, it's in Dallas, Fort Worth, in Texas. And we just strive to be that community that people often are missing, or, just make friends and like-minded people and great conversation like these. And So that's a really dynamic group that we would love to have more people come in and come to events. We do have our winter solstice party, December 15th, if anybody would like to go to that, at the Botanical Gardens. Yay. And then on YouTube, I am a co-host for Atheist Edge. And that is connected to Stitcher and iTunes and then YouTube. And then also Women of Deconversion. That has a special place in my heart, so I always like to plug that. And that's connected to Secular Hangouts on YouTube. And that's just a really great community of women who get together and just kind of talk honestly about their own experiences. And we're trying to add in, as many women as we can to the conversation and maybe branch off to other days. So we are on YouTube Live the first Monday of every month at 7 p.m., I think. And so we'll be doing this week, or this month, December, first Monday of the month, we'll be doing gluttony, I believe. Ooh. Of the 7 deadly sins. We do a series of that lately, as connected to Thanksgiving. So
you're taking me back to my days of reading C.S. Lewis and talking about. I'm getting a sign here saying the Twitter for that is at Met Atheists for the Metroplex Atheists. But yeah, I remember C.S.
Twitter.
Lewis talking about gluttony being the sin that often goes overlooked amongst Christians, and it's actually very pernicious. So that's probably a source text you should look at.
Yeah,
the Screw Tape letters, I believe. So anyway, I think that about wraps up the show for tonight. Courtney, thank you so much for being on. This was really, really fun. I'd love to have you again sometime. This was really cool. Thanks again for everybody who's watching. Remember, always keep wanting the truth. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next week.